Today, the UK's public service broadcaster, the BBC, no longer hold the rights to show any major darts event. They used to be very different. The BBC held the rights to show the BDO World Championship for almost 40 years, after choosing to show the first event all the way back in 1978. That event saw split-screen technology used in darts for the first time, allowing viewers to see the players and the board at the same time, something which made darts much more watchable and has been used on almost all coverage ever since. Over the following decade, darts boomed on the BBC, with the sport achieving record viewing figures for the 1983 World Championship final between Keith Deller and Eric Bristow, in which Deller took out a famous 138 checkout to shock the darting world. That final still holds the overall viewership record for darts, with 8.3 million tuning in on the BBC. The split in darts took place a decade later, with players leaving the BDO and forming the PDC as they were unhappy with the way the BDO was run, which led to a decline in television coverage. The PDC was formed, with the first PDC World Championship being held in 1994 and broadcast by Sky Sports. Sky have broadcast all the biggest PDC events ever since. Over the following 2 decades, the PDC became much more popular than the BDO, and by 2016, the BBC decided to drop their coverage of the BDO World Championship after 38 years. This came during budget cuts, where they needed to reduce their sports budget by £35 million. That was the end of BDO darts on the BBC, but it wasn't long before the sport returned on the network. Just under a month after the end of the final BBC BDO tournament, the PDC announced their new tournament would be held in September 2016, known as the Champions League of Darts, and it would become the first PDC tournament to be shown on the BBC. The event featured 8 players split between 2 round-robin groups, with the top 2 from each group going through to the semi-finals. In the first year of the event, which was 2016 when it took place in Cardiff, the top 2 players from Group A met in the final, with Phil Taylor becoming the event's inaugural winner, beating MVG in the final. In that first year, the BBC coverage of the event was well received, with many fans stating that it was even better than the ITV or Sky Darts productions. Ahead of the 2017 edition, the BBC signed a contract extension to cover the event until 2019, meaning the tournament would be shown on the BBC at least 3 more times. The event remained in Cardiff for 2017, for a memorable tournament which saw Mensa Sulovic win his first major title, beating Gary Anderson in the final. The BBC coverage was again well received that year, but the BBC began to experience issues. During the event, which was shown live before the watershed, rude signs held up by fans were shown, including one with a drawing of male genitalia. This was very unlike the BBC, and sources from the broadcaster stated that the presence of the signs led to an editing nightmare. The BBC reportedly held a meeting with the PDC about the issue, which a spokeswoman said that the director changed away from straight away. The event moved to Brighton in 2018, where it was won by Gary Anderson, giving a third different winner in the first 3 years. Paddy Power took over as the sponsors that year and had a £50,000 9-darter prize, which would be split between the crowd and not given to the player. That meant that any 9-darter in the tournament would have seen each ticket holder win around £25, but one wasn't hit. The BBC coverage was again well received that year and praised. There was a slight issue ahead of one of the group games when Simon Whitlock was accidentally given Peter Wright's walk-on song. Whitlock made light of it and did Wright's dance on the stage, causing the crowd to cheer. It's unclear if that mistake was the fault of the BBC or PDC. 2019 was the final year of the contract for the event on the BBC, and it turned out to be the last time the event was ever held, with the coverage being some of the worst ever seen for a PDC event. They upped the 9-darter prize for the crowd to £100,000, but it could only be claimed by fans who are over 18 and not self-excluded from gambling with Paddy Power. They also opened a challenge Barney area in the fan zone, where fans could throw 3 darts against Raymond van Barneveld, and if they outscored him, they would win £100. Carrying on with the craziness, they made a WWE light belt to give to the event winner. Daryl Gurney also promised to shave his head in support of cystic fibrosis if he was able to raise £10,000. Paddy Power donated £2,500 and Gurney was able to raise £15,000 and fulfilled his promise, playing the event after shaving his head. Those were all very interesting things, but what made the event bad in 2019 was the production, which began badly when one of the presenters was explaining how to hit a 9-darter.
Who will hit that 180, 180, 180. There's a
180, 180, 180? Yeah, they'd bossed. However, the real problems weren't with the presenters, it was with the directing. The cause of this problem was recently brought to light by Dan Dawson, who responded to a tweet by BBC regular Dan Walker, stated that he wanted darts back on terrestrial TV, by stating that in the 2019 Champions League, the BBC producers forgot to book a director who'd covered darts before. An article from Live Darts revealed that the production company overseeing the event, IMG, were covering the Rugby World Cup in Japan at the same time, so many of their senior staff could have been busy. But what happened was unacceptable and became clear during the very first game between Daryl Gurney and Peter Wright, which Wright won with an average in the 80s due to the players missing many doubles, which the directors also did. During the game, as the players prepared to throw a double, a close-up of their face would occupy the screen, whilst the director cut to the right target. However, due to the slowness, by the time the camera cut to the board, the dart was already in there, leading the fans to miss the throws. Wright and Gurney are far from the fastest players too, and so the problem only got worse when faster players took to the oche, with the coverage compared to that of the 1980s. There were literally hundreds of tweets complaining about the situation, which seemed to get worse over the weekend. The final was between Michael van Gerwen and Peter Wright, and a fan replied to the PDC stating that he bet we wouldn't see the winning double go in. Remember that, as it turned out to be a good prediction. In leg 3 of the first to 11 game, MVG hit treble 20 and treble 18 off of 154, the obvious path to leave tops. The camera began to zoom in on tops, but then cut to MVG's face, where he could clearly be seen celebrating, before cutting back to the board to show that the dart was already in. It's important to remember that the fans at events watched the TV feed, so this delayed the crowd reactions too. There were many other errors like that, and moments where the 180 zoom began when a player was clearly switching. Perhaps the worst error came in leg 18, where after Wright missed 3 match darts, MVG was sat on 34. The Dutchman hit single 17, and then went 3 double 7. He hit both those targets, but the cameras missed both of them, and cut to the board when Michael was already walking towards it. That was a key moment which saw Michael cut the gap, and the BBC ruined it. They also missed the leg-winning double in the next leg, which saw Michael make it 10-9 and go just 2 legs behind. The Dutchman then managed to force a last leg decider, which he managed to win, and saw the BBC, much like a fan predicted, miss the match-winning dart go in. Mighty Mike picked up the title belt, and at the time became the only player to have won every active major. The coverage that year had been horrific, and like this fan said, it was good news that that was the final year of the contract. The event was initially scheduled for the 5th and 6th of September on the 2020 calendar, but was not held due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it hasn't been held since. Darts returned to the BBC in 2020 with the World Seniors Championship. It was not produced by the BBC, was only shown on digital platforms such as the iPlayer. Will we ever see a BBC PDC event ever again? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications so that you don't ever miss a new upload. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it.